The ad found me before breakfast, the way a loose thread finds your thumb when you're not looking for it. Bespoke line by Jason Hart, it read, and the photograph below it was a shoulder I knew the way a man knows his own gait in a shop window. The soft roll of a hand-padded sleeve head, the chest built on hair canvas instead of glue, the faint ladder stitch hidden under the lapel where I've signed my work for 45 years. You can change the font on a label. You can't fake the way a coat breathes when it's been coaxed, not pressed, into shape. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. It helps more than you think. At 71, memory doesn't visit me in sudden flashes. It arrives like cloth, weight, drape, the grain you respect or you ruin. 4 ledgers live on the shelf by the south window, spines shiny where my thumbs have worried them, intake books from 1983 onward. Date, client, cloth, lining, pattern number, notes in the margins about forward shoulders or one leg longer than the other. In the drawer beneath, a shoebox of receipts. Dormoy bolts bought in cash when the dollar was a different animal. Bemberg linings in colors a respectable man would never confess he loved. Horn buttons ordered by the gross because nothing good is cheap except talk. All of it in my name. All of it paid for by my hands. Jason's voice on the phone was bright, the way a showroom is bright. "Dad, did you see? Orders are coming in. We're finally getting your work out there." "My work?" I said, tasting the words like a tailor tastes steam. "Whose name is on the tag?" "Don't start," he said, laughing lightly, the kind of laugh you use to bend a rule without admitting it. "Brand needs clarity. People buy a story." "A story has a teller," I said. "Where is he?" Silence. Then the pivot. "The construction is updated. It's modern. People don't care about ladder stitches." "People don't see ladder stitches," I said. "They feel them. That's the point." I hung up, not because I was finished, but because good conversations deserve fittings, not fights. I set the intake books on the table like bolts on a cutting bench and opened to a page that could be Exhibit A in a courtroom I hope never to enter. "Hart, Jonathan," I had written in 2001, when my son thought a suit was a kind of armor and a father was a kind of myth. 3-piece Prince of Wales flannel, 370G, no fusible on the facing, soft chest, Neapolitan shoulder, 2 hidden bar tacks at the back seam for sway back. My pencil had scratched a small check beside Neapolitan. Jason's first lesson that soft in a coat doesn't mean merciful, it means deliberate. I photographed the page, then the receipts. Invoices from Milan addressed to me, proof of payment, supplier stamps that smelled like dust and patience. I wrote a note that said less than I felt and more than a lawyer needed. Notice, patterns, blocks, fit templates, and internal constructions used in the pictured garments are my creations and my property. C-list attached. Use without attribution or consent infringes both authorship and ownership. Willing to discuss license, credit line, and participation, meeting requested. I attached images, inventory numbers, and pattern identifiers. The reply did not wear my son's voice. It wore a job title. "Dear Mr. Hart," the operations manager wrote, "we appreciate your legacy. Our collection is inspired by family tradition. However, our technical team developed the current construction. Let's discuss partnership. Draft agreement prepared?" I poured black tea and smiled the way tailors smile when a man says, "Shorten the sleeves 1 centimeter," and means fix the balance I don't have the words for. The ad's modern construction showed my old trick for narrow shoulder blades. 2 snips in the arm side to ease the back, and a horizontal dart hiding in the forepart that no one under 30 bothers to sew anymore because it steals time and gives only grace. Before noon, I called 2 clients whose suits I recognized in Jason's marketing, Mr. Hill, who argues in court the way I argue with cloth, and Reverend Williams, who knows a pulpit breathes like a lapel. Both confirmed that the photos were theirs. Neither had given permission to use them. Jason asked for family album shots, Reverend Williams said, sorrow in his voice where anger might have been if he were younger. I didn't think they'd end up on a website. Albums forgive, I said. Shop windows ask to be believed. The box of patterns came down from the closet shelf with the weight of a family Bible. Cardboard templates cut to the bone, edges softened by 1,000 tracings. Each marked heart, bespoke, with a number, and on the back, the micro-signature Jason once called my spycraft, a tiny initial in pencil tucked into the curve of a sigh where only a tailor bothers to look. Secrets do not defend themselves. You carry them into the light when you need to. I booked the old shop for the next morning, a courtesy from the landlord who still calls me Kid, because his back remembers when my bench was the last to go dark on Saturdays. The place is empty now, but for light, the good kind that arrives like judgment and forgives like steam. Jason agreed to come, as did his operations man and the lawyer who believes paper is a god. I would bring the things that never lie, books, receipts, patterns, and 2 men who would testify without oath, clients who would not be wheedled by a brand. That night, I ran my hand over the old iron, the kind that breathes when it's hot, because it is not pretending to be anything else. It sighed, a throat cleared for truth. Hold on, I told it. Tomorrow we press pride. Pride takes steam, but it sets. Sleep visited like a friendly tailor, quietly, with good pins and a promise to let the fabric rest. In the morning, I would not argue about fashion. I would fit a boundary and stitch it down. There is a seam you cannot see in every honest coat. It is the one that keeps the rest from shifting. Today, that seam would be my name. If this feels familiar, if someone sold your work as inspired and forgot to say by you, keep reading. The next fitting happens under bright lights, with every stitch turned up and every story laid flat so a man can finally wear his own work without lending it to a stranger. The old shop holds light like a good serge holds a crease, quietly, without bragging. At 9 sharp, I set my ledgers on the cutting table, placed the shoebox of receipts beside them, and laid the pattern bundle on top like a sleeping child. The iron on the end station warmed as if it knew this was not a fitting, but an audit. Jason arrived first, hands in his pockets, posture saying ease while his eyes measured risk. The operations man, Evan, came next with a laptop and the confidence of a person who believes contracts are more real than cloth. Their counsel, Ms. Monroe, carried a leather folio that looked expensive and empty. "This is about clearing the air," Evan said, before we'd even exchanged pleasantries. "We're eager to credit heritage while protecting the brand's present." "You can protect the present," I said, "by crediting the past where it still owns the present." Jason tried a smile. "Dad, let us show you the line. We've refined your ideas. People love it." "People can love a theft," I said. "It's still a theft until it's licensed." Ms. Monroe opened her folio. "Mr. Hart, do you claim exclusive ownership of general tailoring techniques? Sleeves, darts, canvassing, these are industry standards." "I claim ownership of the specific pattern blocks, internal constructions, and fit templates you're using without consent," I said, calm as chalk, "and of the garments you photographed that I made." I opened Ledger 1. The pages smelled like graphite and wool. "Here," I said, and slid it to her. "Client, Hill, William, cloth, 370 grams Prince of Wales, Dormoy. Pattern, heart, 042B. Notes, forward shoulder, 1 9 sway back correction, 2 hidden bar tacks at center back. Delivered March 14th, 2019. Photographed in this room. Used on your website without permission." She glanced at Evan, who didn't meet her eye. "Here," I said, turning to another page. "Reverend Williams. Linen blend, unlined quarter-horse hair chest, ladder stitch under lapel. My signature. Pattern heart 033N. Your ad copy calls it modern deconstruction." "That's my construction. Modern is an adjective for people who don't want to pay for nouns." Jason bristled. "You always make it about money." "It is about ownership," I said. "Money is how strangers acknowledge ownership. Family uses credit." Evan tapped his laptop. "Our technical team has iterated. The shoulder line is contemporary." I walked to the mannequin by the window where a sample from their line hung, and I turned the sleeve inside out with the care a surgeon gives a truth that will scare a room if handled without respect. "Neapolitan sleeve head," I said, "wadding only where the hand placed it. The pick stitches here, 12 per inch, not machine. And under the lapel, my ladder stitch. I leave this knot long." I held it up between 2 fingers, the way a father holds a son's first tooth. "You would only know it if you had been taught to look." Jason swallowed. I saw 17 in his face, the boy who learned that an iron talks back if you listen. Ms. Monroe cleared her throat. "Do you have invoices for materials?" I lifted the shoebox lid and passed her a stack. "Dormeuil, Vitale Barberis, Bemberg. All to my account. Paid. These are not inspiration. They are inventory." "Patterns?" she asked, eyes narrowing into respect. I placed the bundle on the table, untied the twill tape, and spread Heart 042B under the morning light. The cardboard was worn where my forefinger has lived a small life. Back panel, left forepart, right forepart, undercollar cut-on bias, out breast pocket placement with my long dart. On the reverse, H initial in pencil on the arm side curve. No apprentice of mine left without learning that mark. Evan leaned in despite himself. "We can't be sure." "We can," I said, and slid 3 more patterns forward, each with the same bones and different flesh. "This is a system. You are wearing it and selling it without paying for it." Jason's voice found a softer register. "Dad, I wanted to put you on the site. You wouldn't let me take your picture. I asked." "You asked for a smile," I said, "not a license." Ms. Monroe shifted strategy. "What would resolve this?" "A credit line on every page where my work appears," I said. "A license agreement with royalties for any pattern derived from my blocks. A takedown of client photos I made unless those clients consent. A public statement that names the maker whose shoulders you are standing on. And if you want more than that, an agreement for me to supervise construction so your modern doesn't mean cheaper." Silence grew in the room like steam around an iron. Invisible. Inevitable. Evan started to protest. Jason cut him off. "We can do the credit," he said, eyes on me, not on counsel, "and the royalties. And we'll call Mr. Hill and Reverend Williams today. I'll apologize." "Apology is a basting stitch," I said. "It holds until heat makes it permanent." Ms. Monroe exhaled. "Draft terms, then. We'll need to review the scope of derived patterns." "Start with Heart 033 through Heart 052, I said. You're wearing them. Expand as needed. You don't have to guess. You can ask. I closed the ledgers and retied the twill tape. The iron hissed as if it had been following along. Jason stepped toward me, then stopped, measuring the distance the way a tailor measures a hem without looking like he's measuring anything at all. "Dad," he said softly, "I should have asked before I built anything." "You should have asked before you printed my name without the letters," I said. Then I softened what needed softening. "I want you to build. I want the work to outlive me, but it has to carry the weight where it belongs." We set a time for counsel to exchange terms. Evan packed his laptop with less swagger. Ms. Monroe left with more paper than she brought. Jason stayed. "Can I help you put the patterns back?" he asked. "You can learn how to fold them so the same hands don't always do the careful work," I said. We folded in silence. He handled the cardboard gently, as if finally convinced that something exists even if you can't see it on a screen. When he left, the shop felt lighter, not fixed, not finished, but balanced. I wrote a note on the blotter the way I'd jot down a client's sloped shoulder or stubborn left hip. Receipts turned to respect. Next, sew it in so it doesn't shift. Outside the light was kind. Inside the iron cooled. There is nothing loud about a wind that simply returns a name to its seam. It just holds. The first draft of the agreement read like a suit cut without allowance, clean on paper, doomed in motion. Ms. Monroe sent it over 2 days after our meeting. Credit where appropriate, royalties subject to quarterly reconciliation, and a definition of derived patterns, so narrow it could only fit a necktie. Evan added a bright email about forward momentum. Jason wrote, "Dad, we're close. Close isn't good enough when you're fitting something that has to survive rain, grief, and a hard year." I brewed coffee, sharpened a pencil, and did what a tailor does when a pattern lies. Marked corrections in the margins until the paper agreed to tell the truth. Credit where appropriate became conspicuous credit on every product page, label, and marketing material where heart patterns or constructions are used. Subject to quarterly reconciliation became quarterly royalty payment no later than the 15th, with itemized units sold, SKUs, and per unit rate. Interest accrues on late payments. Derived patterns expanded to any pattern, block, or template that descends from, modifies, or replicates the salient fit elements of Heart 033 through Heart 052, including but not limited to chest canvas architecture, sleeve head construction, dart placement, and balance corrections. I added a clause for client photo use. Only with written consent from the client and the original maker if the garment was made by Hart. And because I've seen men try to brawl in a dressing room, I inserted a dispute resolution line. If the parties cannot agree, they will bring the garment and the pattern to an independent master tailor for binding determination. Ms. Monroe pushed back. Binding determination by a tailor is unusual. So is binding a man to a royalty and then not paying him, I said, and suggested 3 names, masters whose hands could tell a machine stitch from a lie in the dark. Jason called that night. "Do you trust any tailor more than me?" "I trust process more than I trust either of us when money is in the room," I said. "Process keeps good people from becoming loud." He didn't argue. That was new. We scheduled a call with Mr. Hill and Reverend Williams. On camera, Jason apologized without hedging. "We used your images without permission. We're sorry. We're taking them down unless you say otherwise. We're adding credit." Mr. Hill nodded once, the way a man nods when he is less interested in contrition than in the next filing. Reverend Williams smiled. "Make the credit a sermon," he said. "Name the maker. Young men will learn from it." Evan balked at the royalty rate. 5% will hamstring us. "Then price honestly," I said. "If your margin cannot hold the weight of the man who made the pattern, your business needs a diet." He suggested a lump sum. I said no. Lumps forgive too much and teach too little. Royalties tell you month by month whether you are still borrowing a man's hands. The iron in my kitchen hissed as I pressed a sleeve the way I press resentment. Heat, then pressure, then rest. We traded drafts. Ms. Monroe learned to stop removing the word conspicuous. Evan learned to stop suggesting that a microcredit in a footer would suffice. Jason learned to forward my notes without defense. The sticking point, predictably, was derived. Ms. Monroe wanted an engineer's proof of lineage. I sent photographs of internals, canvas layouts, pad stitching patterns, the particular asymmetry I use on a forward shoulder that gives a man the feeling of being held in place by a careful friend. "These are fingerprints," I wrote. "Not every imprint is a match, but when you count them, you know who picked up the glass." She relented, adding a schedule for adding new pattern numbers to the scope as the line evolved. We created a simple test. If I could reproduce the fit on a muslin using my block within 2 adjustments, it was derived. If not, it wasn't. The master tailor would arbitrate edge cases, science for cloth. During the last call before signing, Evan tried one more modern trick. We propose inspired by heart on the site, but not on labels. Labels create manufacturing complexity. "Labels create memory," I said. "If a man is buried in one of these coats, his grandson should be able to read the truth without booting a computer. Put it on the label." Jason stared at the table. "We'll do labels," he said, and Evan stopped talking. We signed on a Tuesday at my kitchen table because paper behaves better near heat. Ms. Monroe brought countersigned copies. Evan brought champagne. I brought coffee and a sleeve to demonstrate to anyone still confused that a good stitch is a promise you can touch. Jason brought himself, which is more than he had brought to me in months. When the ink dried, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the way I feel when a collar sits down on a neck for the first time without argument. Relief that the shape was always there, waiting for someone to stop pretending otherwise. "Now what?" Jason asked. "Now you pay for the old work and we build new work honestly," I said. "If you want my supervision, you have it. If you want my silence, you can't afford it." He laughed, not defensively. "Supervision, then?" We went to the shop together and stood at a bench that had outlived better men than me. I showed him a tweak to the outbreast pocket that would stop his sample from collapsing under a phone, and he showed me a lining print I would have dismissed last year and didn't this one because it made a shy man smile. On the way out, I saw our reflection in the front glass. 2 men, same height, different gravity, moving at last in the same direction. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was an alignment, like grain with grain. So the cloth didn't fight while we asked it to do something gentle. That night, the site changed. My name appeared where it belonged, not as a ghost in ad copy, but as a maker whose patterns were licensed, whose credit was conspicuous, whose royalty would arrive whether I scrolled or not. I printed the page and tucked it into Ledger 4. Paper recognizes its own. A business problem had been solved. A family problem had been fitted. Neither was perfect. both would hold. Next, we would test whether the label meant anything in a room full of men who never cared about names until they needed one to explain why their shoulders didn't hurt anymore. 2 weeks after the ink dried, Jason booked a trunk show in the only place where labels either matter or die. A room full of men who distrust adjectives but cry, privately, at nouns. The hotel was a respectable one, with carpets thick enough to forgive a scuffed heel and mirrors that told the truth kindly. Jason insisted I come. Not to be paraded, he said, to be present. Presence is a word men use when they mean witness. We set up early. Bolts of cloth stood at attention. Sample coats hung with their fronts open like pages. On each hanger, a new tag. Pattern Hart 04, licensed. Construction supervised by Hart. It looked simple. It had cost us a month. The first client in the door was a rancher whose hands made the tweed look shy. He tried on a coat and stood still the way men stand when they are deciding between two versions of themselves. "Feels like somebody thought about my shoulder blades," he said. Jason pointed to me without turning it into an announcement. "He did." The man looked at me. "You cut this?" "I cut the way it holds you," I said. "He cut the cloth." The man nodded. The sale wasn't the victory. His posture was. Midday Mr. Hill came by, not in a suit, but in a sweater that apologized for nothing. He shook Jason's hand. "Credit is conspicuous," he said, and moved on to bother the cuff options. Reverend Williams followed with a smile that could have warmed a lesser room. He brought a young associate pastor who watched how the old man was treated and learned more theology from that than from a month of lectures. Credit teaches even when you don't make a slide. A boy came after lunch with his grandfather's trench, folded like an heirloom hymn. "Can you fix this?" he asked me. The collar had died the way collars die. Sweat, salt, years of weather. I flipped it, felt the bones. "I can give it 2 more winters," I said. "3, if you don't abuse it." He grinned. "Abusing it is how we know it's ours." Jason took the order. I wrote the work ticket. The boy asked if he could watch, and Jason said, "Yes, because this is what labels require. Eyes in the room, not just money in the bag." In a lull, an old competitor stopped by and ran his fingers along the lapel like a man petting a dog that once bit him. "You put your name on it now," he said. "We always knew it was there." I shrugged. "A name on the label is for the grandson. My mark under the lapel was for me." He laughed, not unkindly. "And for those of us who bothered to look. We didn't hug. Men like us don't. But we did the thing that counts more. We didn't lie." Jason made a small speech at the end because the hotel insisted on a toast. He kept it brief. "We stand on work we didn't do," he said. "Today, the label says so. Tomorrow, the work will too." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at the cloth, which is where that sentence belongs. After the last client left, and the room exhaled the way a place does when commerce pauses and dignity takes a seat, Jason sat on a packing crate and asked the question that begins a better chapter. "How do we teach this so I don't need you to stand in the room for it to be true?" "Write it down," I said, "on labels, in manuals, in training. Make the credit a habit, not a holiday. Hire a cutter who can argue with you in the language of darts and balance, not metrics, and then build a small library. Keep ledgers 1 through 4 in it. When a new hire asks why the label matters, show them paper." He nodded, serious in a way marketing cannot fake. "Will you help me build the library?" I already did, I said, and patted the ledgers in my bag. You just didn't know it was for you. We packed up. Evan appeared long enough to carry a bolt without checking his phone and to tell me the first royalty report was ready, itemized the way I like to breathe. Ms. Monroe sent a text with a photo of the label sewn into a coat in their workshop. Conspicuous, it read. Lawyers have humor if you pay them for it. On the way out, a young man in a too-tight suit stopped me by the elevator. Sir, he said, my father was a machinist. He hated labels, said the work speaks for itself. Why do you care so much about a name? Because work speaks quietly, I said. Labels whisper for it when rooms get loud. And because someday someone will open your father's toolbox and want to know who taught him to measure twice. Give them a name. He nodded, tucking that sentence into a pocket he'd find later. At home, I opened Ledger 4 and pasted the printed product page with my credit line between entries for men whose spines had been fixed by a pattern that knows how to forgive without collapsing. I added the first royalty statement the next day. Paper keeps better than pride. Jason stopped by on Sunday with 2 sandwiches and a box of old photos I thought were lost. Mom kept these, he said to give them back to you when you needed reminding. We sat at the table and looked at a life in gloss. First shop key, first paid suit, Jason at 7 learning to thread a needle, Jason at 17 pretending he didn't care that he could. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. That's another reason to love labels. They do some talking for tired men. Before he left, Jason asked if we could add one more line to the label. Pattern Heart. Licensed, it would still say. Construction supervised by Hart. It would still promise. Then a final sentence. Made for someone we intend to remember. I told him to keep it off the label and put it in the work ticket, where only a few will read it and most will still feel it. Some sentences need to live where hands live, I said. He kissed my head like a boy who'd found a way to love a father without needing him to be a brand. The door closed, the house held, the iron cooled, the seam you can't see kept doing its quiet job, holding the rest where it belongs. If you've made it this far, you know the moral without me pressing it. Ownership proven becomes respect. Respect sown becomes habit. And habit is how work outlives a man. If you want more stories like this, small victories stitched straight, stay. The next coat is already on the bench. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.